We'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. I'm Stephen McClanahan. I'm a lieutenant with our Police Department Public Affairs Office. We want to thank everyone for their prayers and their patience as we deal with the situation. Today we're going to talk about the mass shooting that happened at the Altar Power Lounge here in downtown Rhode. And I'm going to go over the order of the programs and the woman who's speaking. Today's order will be as follows. Mayor Stover is going to talk about the community, followed by Chief Butler, who's going to talk about the incident. Then we're going to have Greg Thompson with MIMS. He's the Director of Operations. He's going to talk about the transport and the injuries. That'll be followed up with City Manager Bruce Moore. He's going to talk about permits and abatement. And we're going to have closing remarks with Mayor Stover. At this time, I'm going to ask Mayor Stover to come back.
Thank you, Lieutenant McClanahan. My heart is broken, and it was broken again this morning when I woke up and heard the news about the mass shooting at the Altar Power Lounge. It's broken not only for the victims that were involved in this tragic situation, but heartbroken for their families and heartbroken for our city. And I know I speak on behalf of all of my colleagues, the City Board of Directors that are assembled here with me, in telling you that we have dedicated and we continue to rededicate ourselves to what we can do to make this city safe. That sickening feeling in the gut of your stomach is something you never want to feel. And certainly on a 4th of July weekend where we wish to anticipate having fun with our friends and family, this is certainly a terrible, terrible tragedy. I want to thank and commend our first responders. Thanks to their response, the work of the medical professionals in our hospitals, and by the grace of God, all of the victims are expected to survive. I want to reassure our public that this was not an act of terrorism, but a tragedy, a local community tragedy. It does not appear to be a planned shooting. It appears that there was a disagreement amongst a small subset of individuals at a concert that turned violent because of the presence of rivalries and weapons. I want to take a moment here in a minute after our officials give their briefing to address some of the bigger issues affecting our community. But there are two things that are readily apparent. We must do more to keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people, and government can do something to help us with that. We also should be outraged that a promotional video with a gun on the front cover inviting people to a concert suggesting the issues of violence should also be totally unacceptable in our community. We need to do these things before tragedies happen. And so we come down here and we know that we've got to use a hammer. We've got to use a big hammer on the people who would do violence with guns and hurt people. So we'll speak more about this in a moment, but I want to turn over the press conference now to Chief Buckner, who's going to give you an update on the details of the investigation. Chief Buckner.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon. I'm going to go into some of the details of the incident and how they kind of unraveled as we know them today. All of the information that I'm going to give you is based upon preliminary information and is subject to change. Approximately 2:30 a.m. at the Power Lounge located on 6th Street, there was a concert with a Memphis entertainer identified as a fitness two-time who was scheduled to be the headliner for the concert. There were also some local artists that were scheduled to perform at this concert. Some sort of dispute ensued in the audience during the event, and there were multiple shots fired, and we believe multiple individuals responsible for those shots fired. Again, I want to echo what the mayor said. We do not believe this was an act of terror, nor was it an active shooter situation. Off-duty police officers were also at some point working this event. They were there from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. There was a normally scheduled time to be there. Their job was to work the parking lot for this venue, which is typical for these types of venues and police working off-duty at that location. During their tenure there, shortly before they left for their 2 a.m. exit time, some members with the headliner group for the entertainment attempted to enter the venue, one of which was openly carrying a weapon. Our officers engaged that individual, attempted to stop that individual, but it appears that some of the individuals went to an alternate entry into this location and actually gained access to the venue. That appears that most of the shots that were fired, this occurred inside the venue, but that's based upon preliminary information. We do not have any information that leads us to believe that anything occurred outside as it relates to the shots fired. The location was also checked at approximately 12:30 a.m. by our vice detective, which was part of their routine patrol to go and check some of the venues throughout our city, but we have had complaints on this venue. The victims are all appear to be African American, both male and female, with the youngest being the age of 16, the oldest being the age of 35. 28 individuals in total were injured, 25 result of gunshot wounds, 3 as a result of attempting to flee the venue when the chaos ensued. Of those individuals that were injured, up to 22, we believe that 2 are listed in critical condition at this time. The other individuals have what we believe to be non-life-threatening injuries. I cannot thank our hospitals enough for their response, and to have this kind of mass incident occur in our city, and the fact that we're standing here today and 28 people, 25 of which were shot and no one is dead, speaks to a lot of things on our first responders and also our hospitals and how they were able to bridge with us to help these individuals. And those hospitals specifically were these 25 folks that kind of scattered throughout Central Arkansas are UAMS, Baptist, St. Vincent, Children's, and Baptist Spring Hill in North Little Rock. To our community, we have no reason to believe at this time that anyone in the general public is at harm of any further incidents from this group. We believe it was associated with some of the individuals who were inside. So we want the public to know that we feel like that there's no risk or any harm for anything to go about your daily lives. This does appear, as the mayor alluded to be a continuation of disputes from some of our local groups who have been disputing, that you've seen some of the things playing out in our streets that have resulted in drive-by shootings and other shooting victims, a few of which that we have warrants for their arrest. Also, to our officers, it is very, very important that I want them to know that this is why we train. This is why we pursue best practices. This is why we want to subscribe to 21st century policing principles. This is why I send you around the country to develop networks to have the kinds of information that we need, that when you have your moment in your city, and in America today, unfortunately, we're seeing this play out too much. I could not be proud of how you responded on that day. It says so much that we had that many people who were injured, and our people were able to get there, declare a safe scene for our EMS folks to enter and do their jobs, and we greatly appreciate that. Also, I want to let the public know that we would not have been able to do this alone, although we're the ones standing up here talking as we should be, because this is our city. But the surrounding chiefs in Central Arkansas have reached out and certainly extended their help. We're currently working with ATF and FBI, who are here represented today, who are also helping us with the investigation and many of the tools that they have. We don't have the resources to do some of the broad things they're able to do, and they're being here early, and we certainly appreciate their help. Also, the state police and the governor's office has extended their help for any needs we may need with the crime lab or the state police. So at this time, we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that occurred with the injured from Greg from Mills.
I think of what Chief Buckner said a couple of years ago. Little Rock Police, Little Rock Fire, and MIMS began to work together to prepare for kinds of mass tragedies like what we faced last evening, and it really began to pay off last night. When our medics began to arrive on the scene, we began to do our triage. We found that some of the victims had already been triaged by the police department. A total of 5 tourniquets were used and 1 chest seal. I say a few years ago, we've never seen anything like that, and I believe that their actions had direct positive impact on the outcome of this event. A lot of people self-evacuated from the scene. Some of them went to Children's Hospital. I'll talk about that in a second. There were 10 left on the scene who were not able to self-evacuate, so we were able to transport them out, working with the Arkansas Trauma System to make sure they were scattered to the appropriate hospitals. Of the 2 that went to Children's, they were adults. Of course, Children's is a pediatric facility, not able to take care of those, so we worked again with the Trauma System to make sure those 2 were transported to the appropriate facilities. There was one other hospital that Chief Buckner didn't mention because I hadn't told him yet, and that is Conway actually played into that mix too, to make sure that we had spread the patients out because of all the self-evacuations to the other hospitals. At this point, that's all I have.
We'll take questions, the chief and I and others will take questions here in just a moment, but I want to let you know that this feeling of heartbreak is on big. It's not unique to Little Rock, by the way. It's happening in cities, urban cities throughout the country. I have received calls from New Orleans, the mayor of New Orleans, the mayor of Louisville, all of which have pledged to do anything they can to help us, because we know that we have to have a collective effort and to learn from each other as it relates to those things. And I know that we've got people here in this city that are dedicating their lives to stopping the violence, both in our police department and in the community. We have people in organizations, we have people in our churches that are helping, reaching out, trying to provide an opportunity for young people to go in the right direction instead of the wrong direction, offering mentoring services and other. And I know that they are as frustrated as I am that the resources, the time, the money, the coordination are not yet yielding the results that we want. But we must press on. We must continue to press forward as a community. This is a community problem and it is a community issue that we can solve. Let me mention a couple things. First of all, the lounge, the Ultra Power Lounge. The ABC has suspended the liquor license effective today. The city is going to be placing this property in our criminal abatement program, and we will be shutting this location down, absolutely. The manager of the property has advised that he is also providing an eviction notice to the operators of the lounge. So this activity downtown is going to cease. It also should be a recognition to the other late night clubs and places that we have that we're going to be extra vigilant as it relates to the issues of people walking the streets with guns. It's very important that we work on trying to remove the guns from the people. You should not have them. And who is that? I want to let you know that I've talked with the governor, I've talked with the Attorney General, Governor Hutchinson, and I have talked about the importance of putting together a group of both state and local officials that will be working with our probation and parole officers so that people on probation and parole that are carrying weapons can be apprehended and they can be prosecuted and convicted and put in jail. We also, I've talked with Larry Jegley, our prosecuting attorney, and he is assigned a special deputy to be specially deputized with the U.S. Attorney's Office so that we can get those cases adopted to the federal level where the sanctions are much, much more serious and they can be kept in jail longer. This is the kind of long-term type of activities that are going to be yielding results. We've got to take these repeat gun offenders off the streets, which means we're going to have increased supervision and monitoring by our probation and parole officers. Let me emphasize that we believe this is a very small group of repeat offenders that are bent on violent crime. We have a violent crime apprehension team that of 25 officers that are working all of these hot spots that we receive reports from. It is very important that the community let us know when they hear shots fired so that we can be there and try and make sure that we investigate appropriately what is happening at the time. I want you to know that the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the FBI, and the U.S. Marshal's Office here in Little Rock, and they're here with us today, along with the Memphis offices, are also working with us as it relates to this specific incident. Now, this issue, this problem, this challenge of too many people just resolving their disputes with guns cannot be just simply resolved with arrest and conviction. We know that there's going to have to be a difference made in the future for people in terms of giving them something to lose. That is why the city, my board of directors here, have dedicated over $5.5 million a year as we continue to do for intervention and prevention programs. It's also why my office is going to continue to make sure that these funds go where they're actually needed. Opportunity is the key, and we don't have any magic wand to undo the disparities of opportunity. But together, I know with the hard work, we can do everything we can to change that. So we can deal with the issues of economic mobility, we can assist people in trying to get jobs, and it may mean that we need more programs that seek to revitalize neighborhoods, to bring back disadvantaged neighborhoods, to work more aggressively in terms of having people understand the importance of respect and the value of life and property. It may mean asking the community to reach out every day and be a role model for our young people. We must understand that one person alone cannot solve this problem or be blamed for the problem. A police chief alone can't solve this problem. A minister alone can't solve this problem. A city director alone can't solve this problem. And a mayor alone can't solve this problem. But a citizen alone also cannot solve this problem. But collectively, we as a community can do so. So by working together, by combining smart policy, important investments, and certainly using prayer, I'm certain that we can make a change and bring safety back to our city. So with that said, I'll open this up for questions and ask the Chief to come forward. I'm sure there's going to be quite a few questions that are going to be asked.
Chief, what can you tell us about the suspects?
At this time, because we're very early in our investigation, we're still developing that information as to who was a witness, who was a suspect, who fired shots, who was actually in the location to try to see who saw what. So it's too early for us to know who the suspects are. Obviously, we know who some of the entertainers were for the event, but right now we don't have any suspect information that we would be able to give you to release to the public.
You mentioned that the public should not live in fear at this point. Can you tell us why you believe that? If you don't have anyone in custody, are they still in town? Have they skipped town?
Because I believe that the incident that occurred, we certainly know that it began between what appeared to be rival groups in the audience that was there. So I do not believe that the general public is at risk for these individuals because the dispute is between these two organizations, whoever else that may have fired shots in that location. And that was the purpose of me making that statement.
You said several suspects. Are we talking 5, 10? Do you know where they...
Take the question here, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
There's a lot of questions coming from the community. We know there's a long-standing feud between a lot of Little Rock and Memphis gangs. Do you think that that situation could be at play with this scenario?
I think that the history and the challenges of both Little Rock and Memphis are well documented. I think when you have a concert venue where you have young people and force these two cities into a small room when some kind of dispute ensues, it was a recipe for disaster. Obviously, we'll learn more things as we begin to unfold with this investigation, but to be able to say that this is a result of a conflict between Memphis and Little Rock, I don't have enough information to give you that kind of definitive answer.
Chief, you mentioned previous shootings.
Please, Shirley, have a question, please.
You said several suspects. Are we talking 5, 10? Can you tell us if they're from here, out of town?
Because we don't know what we don't know yet, we're still in the process of actively interviewing both victims and witnesses from the venue. I would have no idea as to how many people actually fired shots at that location.
Any members with the performers?
We don't know that information either. Yes, sir.
Chief, you mentioned that several previous shootings that occurred here in Little Rock, at least 10 over the last 2 weeks or so. Can you say definitively that this incident is linked to at least some of those shootings?
There is a possibility that some of the recent shootings could have something to do with the conflict that was inside that location. As you all can probably appreciate, although I know it must be frustrating if you're trying to get information into this to us. But because we don't know what we don't know, I don't want to prematurely put something out there in the universe that I can't stand behind. But it's certainly, we certainly feel like that there's a possibility that there could be a connection with the recent shootings that we've had.
So they could be linked. And have you been able to speak with the performer?
We have not spoken to the performer yet, but that is certainly one of the individuals and anyone that was inside that venue that we certainly want to speak to.
And is anyone in custody currently?
We do not have anyone in custody as a result of this incident, no.
You mentioned there was security out there. You mentioned there was security out in the parking lot. Was there ever security inside the club, and were they patting patrons down at all?
To my knowledge, the security inside the venue would have been the individuals that were working from the Power Lounge. There were no police officers working inside the venue. Our responsibility was for the parking lot, and we were there from 11 p.m. To 2 a.m. And also there was a very brief contact that we had with the venue with our vice detectives that checks many of our licensed venues in the city that happened to be on our list that night.
So you don't know their procedure as far as if their security was patting anybody down going through the club?
That I do not have that information yet. That's something that we will learn as we continue our investigation.
Can you tell me how many?
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
You spoke a little bit about the drive-by shootings. You said that could have some type of ammunition into what happened this morning. Can you talk a little bit about that? And you mentioned something about active warrants. with the drive-bys?
There are a couple of ones that we can make sure that we get the information into our media outlets, and they're listed on our social media for the couple of individuals that we've identified for some of the recent shootings that we believe are responsible for those. And then we certainly, given the time span and close connection to that, that's why we think there may be a connection with some of the recent shootings for that.
But you guys are still not 100% sure yet if that isn't that.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Chief, you mentioned,
Yes, sir.
do you have an idea, given the number of shots fired and the venue there, do you have an idea of why there weren't any fatalities from this? What about this? Why aren't there more deaths?
Well, the honest answer I would give you is because God wasn't ready for those individuals. But the second part is I would tell you that we have professional people responding to that incident, and they did what they were trained to do, and I know that they probably had something to do with the fact that we didn't have any fatalities.
Do you know how many shots, do you all know how many shots total were fired, or how many weapons there were?
I don't know how many shots were fired. There's obviously a video that you all are well aware of, and we were certainly aware of as well. You can see that there was probably 20 to 40 shots fired just based upon the video, and that's only that one caption for that. But there were multiple shots fired there, but I don't know the exact number.
The number of weapons, do you all have an idea on
I
that?
have no idea of that at this time.
Chief, in these situations, people are quick to blame police to try to figure out what they're not doing. Do you think there's anything that Little Rock Police could have done differently, or any opportunities to maybe change some policies after this experience?
Well, we have a tremendous burden for public safety. So, to say if people are blaming the police, sometimes we feel that way, but we also know that we have a tremendous responsibility. But I can tell you that as we continue our investigation and we look at our after-action report and opportunities for improvement, things that we could have done, should have done, we will certainly document that. We will attempt to close those gaps through training, through policy, through procedural things to make sure that we we don't have culpability in some of the things that occurred there. But there's always opportunities for improvement when you go back and look at your role in what took place there.
Chief, since other people were able to gain access through a different entrance with guns on them, how many officers did you have out there in the parking lot that one managed not to go in, but then others managed to go in?
It is my understanding that there were 2 police officers working the event for the parking lot there. So, and I'm not sure as to how many entries are actually in that location, as we're all familiar with concert-type venues are normally multiple entries that someone can make entry to, but obviously someone let these individuals in with weapons.
Chief, throughout the news conference, you've been saying, you refer to some of these groups as groups, organizations, things of that nature. We haven't heard you say the word gang. Why is that?
You're going to hear me say the word gang now. We believe that this potentially involves gang activity. I'm not a chief that walks back from that phrase or tries to act as if we don't have that issue, but because you insult intelligent people when you do that. Questions?
Chief, the promoter of this and the performer at it, even if they didn't fight that fire shots, do you think they would face charges for their role in this? I mean, we talked about the potentially, potential culpability, and you think they could face any
Well,
charges?
but because we don't know what we don't know, there certainly could be something once we look at the investigation and we have a completed file. Prosecutors have an opportunity to review those files, that something like that could possibly happen. But I don't want to this early in this incident begin to point fingers at anyone because I don't know who did what or what their responsibility was for this incident.
Chief, is there any concern about moving forward tonight? I mean, obviously, after something like this, people are angry, people are irritated. Is there a concern for public safety tonight at any of these nightclubs or these bars?
Well, we're always concerned about our venues, particularly with our nightclubs, which is why for many of them we have the kind of restrictions that we do in place to where we can put security kind of restrictions on them. Obviously, we feel like it as a government, there's some things that we probably need to look at for these event type venues to make sure that we can close all of the gaps so that they are not able to bring in individuals or events that could potentially be inflammatory without us knowing about that, to give us an opportunity to get on the front end of that with our planning and procedures to try to prevent some of that. Obviously, some of these things broke down or were not in place for this event, so we will be looking at that. And as far as the ongoing conflicts, that's a staple of our daily thoughts We always want to make sure that the public is safe, and that's a responsibility that we have each and every day.
Have you guys had any chatter online about there being retaliation after what happened earlier this morning?
I'm not aware of any kind of chatter online that was specifically referenced retaliation as a result of this incident.
Chief, you mentioned that, or the mayor mentioned that 2 of the victims are still in critical condition. To your knowledge, how many have been treated and released already? Do you know that?
I do not know how many individuals have been released already. I know that several of the wounds were considered like flesh wounds, maybe from a graze or something of that nature, but I do not know who is still in the hospital.
Chief, have you spoken with the owner of the club? I tried to talk to him, he was just too shaken apparently, but have you spoken?
We've spoken briefly with him. Obviously, we plan to do extensive interviews with anyone that we feel like has information we may need to complete this investigation, but we have briefly spoken with the owner.
Chief, does the performer of the club have any outstanding warrants himself?
I believe that the promoter of the performer that was at the event does have outstanding warrants for him. There are not warrants related to this incident, but there are warrants related to another city where he was performing and for another venue.
You know, we've done a little bit of research, some of the stuff on social media. It sounds like this performer has a track record of violence wherever he goes. Were you guys aware of that before he came to Little Rock?
I have not seen the performer's criminal history. Obviously, the 2 warrants that listed for the performer involve violence. I don't know what kind of history he has in Memphis or some of the baggage that he brought in or the members of his entourage into what they had. But it certainly is concerning when you have someone who has a picture of their advertisement showing a gun that's performing in your city.
Were the officers aware? These were off-duty working security?
Off-duty officers.
And were they aware of that poster ahead of time?
No, that I'm not aware of. It's not uncommon for our officers to work entertainment venues, specifically the outside, and with those, and how much information they had as to who was performing and what their background was. If I had to guess, I would say probably would be limited.
And have you guys attempted to reach out to this performer, trying to talk with this performer? Has he not picked up the phone, or are you guys hesitant?
We're trying to contact anyone that we are definitively sure that they were at that venue and that we would like to talk to them about their involvement or what they possibly witnessed at this incident.
Mayor, so
I've seen last night, probably the biggest crime scene that I've seen here. I've only been here for 2 years, but the largest crime scene that I've seen thus far. What type of resources were pulled last night to manage this crime scene, to collect evidence? I mean, we're talking a lot of shell pieces.
We had probably 20 plus individuals from the police department that responded to that scene, and that's just a response. That doesn't include the initial officers who were part of their first responders who were actually working that night. We also had members from ATF, FBI helping us very, very, very early. So I would say there was maybe 20 to 30 individuals that were probably involved with this investigation at the early stages.
Chief, do we know if the performer's still in town?
I'm sorry?
Is the performer still in town cooperating with police at this time?
That I do not know if the performer is still in town, and certainly we don't have any information to say that he's cooperating with police or anything right now.
Chief,
Yes, sir.
the state already just passed a bill where now you can have guns in the bars and in the schools and in churches and so forth. With this particular, with that, the governor helped maybe restate that bill that allows guns now to be taken into places where they say this just happened 2 weeks ago.
I think that's a valid question. I think that when we see bills like that passed, while I think that most people respect and appreciate the Second Amendment, I think that we can do so by being responsible and how we apply that. But I think that that's something that all of our elected officials have to take a look at to see if what we're doing, are we getting the kind of outcomes that we want from that. Obviously, this would be an unintended consequence of something that happened, but I don't want to point fingers and say that the fact that we had this recently passed law, that's the reason that this incident happened. The individuals who committed that act are responsible for this.
Chief, or Mr. Mayor, any kind of curfew that you guys are considering tonight, that you guys have talked about that would be in place?
We have not discussed a curfew for the city. I just don't know if that would be appropriate for what we have now. We pretty much feel like that we have that situation under control and certainly contained in what we're doing. As far as the chief is concerned, you all have heard me speak publicly about curfews, particularly when we talk about our juveniles and the fact that a 16-year-old was in this venue tells you, so if that's the case, and you have someone who's in violation of that curfew, where do you take that juvenile? And who do you return them to? And how responsible were they that the juvenile was actually in there in the first place? So while it may have good intentions, in some cases, some of these juveniles are out and their parents don't know where they are because mom's working a second or third job to try to make ends meet. And I don't know if a curfew and penalizing and ensuing fines to those individuals will solve the problems. I think the problems that we have in our city are very broad, they're very complex, and there's no single solution that's going to be able to address that.
Chief, what can the residents in those 25 hot spots that were alluded to expect as a result of this incident?
I don't understand your question, ma'am.
If the residents living in the communities where the 25 hot spots that the mayor alluded to, can they expect increases in police activity?
Yes, ma'am. We are an intelligence-led police department, and in layman's terms, that means that we allow our data to dictate where we deliver our energy and our resources. So the areas where we're having problems are always a priority as to how we deploy our police services. So those areas will continue to see heavy police presence, heavy police visibility, and action in the areas where we're having problems. But as the mayor stated earlier, the police alone cannot solve these issues.
Do you expect potential other drive-by shootings to occur between these two rival gangs in the next coming days at all? Or?
I would hope not. If I were able to predict, what they're going to do and when they're going to do it, we would probably be a little more effective about, neutralizing these individuals. It's very difficult to do that because they're so all over the place, and you never know when that conflict is going to come to a head. But we're certainly trying to do what we can from an intelligence standpoint to try to prevent some of these things when we know that there is some sort of dispute between individuals or organizations.
Do you know how many organizations we're talking about? Is it just 2? Is it 4 or 5 all fighting each other? Or?
That I don't know as to how many people who identify themselves or whatever were in the venue and took part in this dispute. And I also don't want to broad brush everyone that happened to be in that venue. We all enjoy music. It was also to Mr. I forgot my friend from KRK. Mitch said, that Kenton, you didn't say the gang word. I also didn't say rap. I didn't say hip hop. I'm a fan of hip hop. This was a rap artist. I don't want to broad brush that genre of music. I don't want to broad brush everyone who was in that venue.
I was talking more about the actual individuals.
I understand, but I don't want anyone to broad brush anything because most of the people who were in there had nothing to do with the conflict. They just happened to be true victims of some stupidity.
Are any of those people in the groups among the people injured? Were they sent to separate hospitals?
Great question. From what we know now, it does not appear that any of the individuals that we have in our area hospitals are from outside the city. The individuals that we're aware of in our area hospital all appear to be Central Arkansas residents.
No, I don't mean if they're from Memphis, I mean if they're from these separate groups that are feuding.
No, that we're still trying to determine as to what the association and connection is with each individual.
So some of these victims could end up turning into suspects?
Very much so. Very much so. Yes, sir.
Chief, can you expand it all on the narrative leading up to the gunshots? I mean, was it just bad blood between rival gangs, or did something trigger? Was there an argument?
From what we know in the very early stages of our investigation, again, at the time of the incident, the headliner performer, Fitness 2 Times, was on the stage. Something occurred in the audience, as you can see there from the video that's on Facebook, and then from there, it appears that other people engaged in gunfire, but it appears to start in the audience. It does not appear to have started on stage.
Were shots coming from the stage and the audience, back and forth?
That we do not know yet. It's too early for us to know as to who fired what and from what location they did that from.
Can you confirm the performer's real name?
The performer's real name.
We didn't want to do that due to officer safety reasons.
Ricky Hampton.
Thank you. How do you spell that? How do you spell
Common
that?
spelling is what I would have.
With Y for Ricky.
Y for Ricky, yes.
Where does he have outstanding warrants?
Out of Forest City.
Do you believe the suspect?
The relationship to the gun in conversation, is there any way that you kind of do something about who gives our children access to the gun? Because all we see now, basically, under 21 people, there's really drive license. Is there any way, as the mayor talked about, of finding out how they children get guns and what way they can deal with their access?
They're about, in the U.S., depending upon what information that you read, about 300 million guns on the streets of the United States. But I want to tell you how broad the issue is that there are so many different avenues that someone can come to access with the gun, and trying to wrestle with that is difficult, if not impossible, to prevent that. But the gun issue is certainly part of the conversation.
Do you believe suspects are, and you may have mentioned this earlier, and if you did, I apologize. Suspects, do you believe some are from Little Rock, some are from Memphis? You don't know if they're all from Memphis?
Until we can definitively determine who was responsible for the shootings, I can't tell you where the suspects were from or who we believe the shooters were, because our investigation is too early to be able to give that information.
And what kind of cooperation are you getting from people inside, in the victims?
Well, we're talking to all of the victims, and it is very early, so the information that we have gleaned from those interviews, I don't have that information with me.
Chief, other than that video that's out there that everyone has seen, do you have security footage from the club that you guys are going through, or did they?
That's something that's a part of your early investigation, to see if, number one, if there were cameras in the venue, if there are cameras in the immediate vicinity on the perimeter, what cell phone footage was captured by the patrons that were in that location. So all of that information will be kind of a part of the fact-finding, gathering of information for this incident.
Chief, what is the ATF's role in the investigation?
They will, the same thing as all of our federal partners, they will act in a support role for anything that resource-wise that they have that they can help us with. Their abilities is very, very broad in the things that they can do. So they have always been a pre-existing partner to us, but in these kinds of incidents, when you can call people at 2 a.m. in the morning, it's certainly a benefit to us to have them on our team.
How many people were in the club at the time of the shooting?
That I don't know. That's something we will have to determine.
The windows that were broken out, was that literally people jumping out of the building, or was that from gunfire?
Well, we don't know exactly, but we think that a couple of the people who were injured, who were gunshot wounds, could have been from them jumping from the window or injured trying to exit that location.
Can we give Chief a break? I got a question for the mayor. Can we give him a break real quick? Thank you. Mayor, you and I have spoken extensively about your dismay with the campus carry bill that is now law. You said you did not believe more guns were the answer for the city of Little Rock or the state of Arkansas. Can you tell me how you're feeling about that today? Has that changed?
Well, no, we've got guns obviously in the hands of the wrong people. So we've got to use whatever tools we've got to try and get rid of those guns. The question was asked about our juveniles that get apprehended that have a gun. We've got national organizations that can trace those guns. The ATF can trace those guns. We can find out where they came from, whether they were stolen, whether they were bought legitimately and then got into the hands of someone illegally. So there's a variety of things we can do with existing laws that we need to obviously rededicate and ramp up. The issue of felons in possession of firearms, I can tell you as a former prosecutor, it's very disconcerting to me. We need stronger state laws, and that's why we asked the federal government to adopt these felon in possession with firearm laws, firearm cases, because they'll spend about 8.5 years in the federal pen if the case is adopted through the federal system. And so I personally advocate for some stronger laws on the state level as it relates particularly with the issue of felons in possession of firearms. And I will predict for you that once we get this information, you're going to find out that a lot of the people, both victims and suspects, have prior criminal records and probably are on probation or parole.
And you said you prefer longer sentences for these individuals, but we also know that Arkansas has a prison crisis and they're letting people out by the boatload. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a matter of who they keep and who they let go. Certainly the issue consistency in sentencing as it relates to drug crimes is something that's very important. The drug trade, I don't think it's any secret, has helped to drive some of these rivalries that we have. So we've got to interdict that in terms of the suppliers, number one. Number two is that I appreciate the fact that the state is concerned about the number of beds that they have and the cost of adding beds. So the question is really thinking smartly, and I think the governor has worked on the issue of figuring out and trying to figure out who can be released properly on parole and those that need to be kept. And I have, for one, advocated for greater electronic monitoring. The parole officers that we have here in Pulaski County have a tremendous overload. We have the ability to overlay the people who are on parole with where the criminal incidents are happening in the city. And it is hand in glove, pretty much so, when you look at where the parolees are being listed as living and where this kind of criminal activity is occurring. So it tells me that if we work smart and focus on those areas, we can begin to try and stem some of this violence. But I can promise you that most of these people have been in trouble before. A lot of them are going to have criminal records. And so the question is, why do they have those guns? How do we use our systems that we have in place to try and make sure that they don't, that we can eliminate that from them?
Well, if they keep repeating, do you think the laws and the statutes that we have in place are working?
Well, not completely, obviously. Obviously, I wouldn't if I thought that we need to be more aggressive on the issue that I just mentioned. I know that there's, we used to have standard bonds for certain kinds of crimes. That's been eliminated. I've asked the prosecuting attorney to make sure that we eliminate that, so there's no standard bond that is being used. We can look at the prior criminal record of an individual and work closely with our courts to make sure that there's greater communication as it relates to the people that really need to be locked up and be in jail, as opposed to those that are going to be conforming their activity and to appropriate standards while they're waiting for their case to be resolved. We've got a huge drug addiction issue. Drugs in America is feeding a lot of the crime that's occurring. I talked to the mayor of New Orleans, where there's an increase in violence. I talked to Greg Fisher, my friend in Louisville, who's got, again, the same kind of issue affecting his city that we have here. And there's no question that we're seeing the same kinds of behavior that is driving this increase in violence. And it's largely segregated in their cities to certain parts of the city. And so, again, we try to work collectively to do everything we can to try and eliminate those threats. So that's why we've got a violent crime apprehension team that uses our predictive policing, our technology, to try and anticipate where the next violent action is going to occur. But I can tell you, the chief's not Superman, I'm not Superman. None of these people are Superman. We cannot stop speeding bullets. We've got to get the community, number one, as it relates to some of these incidents that have happened, we've got to have the community come forward and communicate with our police officers. We can't solve these cases without the community adopting the desire to make sure that Little Rock is going to be a safe place to live and to grow up. And so, again, we're calling on the community to let us know who's involved in these cases. We've got to have that information in order to solve these crimes and try and put this to rest. But it is a community issue, so not one person alone can solve it, but I can tell you that we're all dedicated and rededicated to try and do everything we can to try and bring safety back to the streets.
Hey, Chief, the gentleman that your officers confronted with, I believe is a security bar for the performer, does that person have a concealed carry permit, and was there any reason to arrest him there?
I'm not sure what all of that encounter included. Certainly that's something that we would want to find out if the person legally is able to have a firearm. The fact that we didn't make an arrest, I would say that possibly he probably did, but I don't have exact information for that.
Chief, you said you're not concerned about public safety tonight. Is there any concern for your officers' safety?
I was concerned for officer safety every night. That's only when I get up, it's only when I go to bed, it's only when I'm away. You can't disconnect from that. While we're sitting here talking today, our officers are making traffic stops, they're walking up to driveways, they're knocking on doors. And on the other side of that, in some instances, is danger. We've just seen an officer in San Antonio that was killed yesterday, so this is a very dangerous profession. We know what we've signed up for, but it still doesn't make it easier for us to manage that on something that is clearly appears to be getting more dangerous by the day.
Chief, are you having the same problem that we're having, that witnesses aren't talking? Did y'all run into that same problem this morning?
That's a historical problem. Some of that I certainly understand. No one wants to be the subject of some sort of retaliation, but we have a number of different avenues to where people would come forward through anonymous avenues to be able to give us information. So there are ways that people can cooperate, but I will tell particularly our communities, to the question from the young lady where we have the 25 hotspots or so, you have to get engaged to help us help you, because without information, sometimes we kind of run around chasing our tails. But as we can see in our community, many of our high-profile arrests have been made as a result of the community giving us information. So while we certainly would like to see that more robust, we certainly have had some success with people coming forward. I'll take our last question. All right, thank you.
Let me just correct something. I mentioned there were 25 officers assigned to our violent crime apprehension team. I don't think we said there were 25 hotspots. I don't think that's correct, so I want to make sure that doesn't get misreported. Secondly, let me just say that a couple of years ago, we had a group of our board members who went out to look at these late night venues, these late night clubs, lounges, et cetera, to look at them and to see what we could do to make sure that they were not only compliant with the law, but that we tried to keep the issues safe. I know our city manager, Bruce Moore's here, and I'm going to ask Bruce and our city attorney to revisit our codes as it relates to how we have these issues zoned, how people get permits, and whether or not we need to continue to have these things that are open beyond 2 o'clock. I think clearly the situation justifies a review, and Bruce, I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk about the fact that we can look at our codes, we can look at that and try and tighten that issue up to make sure that most of these places operate professionally, and they operate in a very responsible way, but we have a situation like what happened tonight, and then we're reacting to a tragedy. So we'd rather be on the front end of this, and we've looked at it once, but I think certainly this merits looking at it again.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mayor and Tom, Department of our City Attorney, have visited today. One of the things that we do need to clarify is that this location isn't necessarily classified as a club. It's an exit zone, there's a restaurant. We do have a procedure in place for a special event center. This particular location has not gone through that process, so I have asked the city attorney to immediately on Monday to initiate the process to close that place down. And I feel very confident we'll get before a judge and do that. We do need to, we always want to continue to look at our ordinances as far as how we need to adjust. Actually, since we put the ordinance in place with some very strong restrictions if they don't comply, I think we really have done a good job, and they've been adhering to the rules there. So we will look at it, and we'll definitely move forward on the building on 6th Street next week.
Thank you all very much for coming.